Welcome back, everyone, to this second in a three-part series about the formation of conscience. I'm Archbishop Peter Sartain. Our conscience, in fact, is a voice that speaks lovingly within us. The bishops of the Second Vatican Council gave a beautiful definition of conscience in the Pastoral Constitution on the Church in the modern world. Here's what they wrote. Deep within his conscience, man discovers a law which he has not laid upon himself, but which he must obey. Its voice, ever calling him to love and to do what is good and to avoid evil, sounds in his heart at the right moment. For man has in his heart a law inscribed by God. His conscience is man's most secret core and his sanctuary. There he is alone with God, whose voice echoes in his depths. Now, some years later, Blessed John Paul II commented on this passage, and here's what he said. Conscience is the most secret core and sanctuary of a person, where we are alone with God. In the depths of our conscience, we detect a moral law which does not impose itself on us, but which holds us to a higher obedience. This law is not an external human law, but the voice of God, calling us to free ourselves from the grip of evil desires and sin, and stimulating us to seek what is good and true in life. In other words, what Blessed John Paul was indicating to us is that if freedom is to be full and authentic, it must be educated by the formation of a right conscience. Otherwise, we risk misusing our freedom and falling into evil, intentionally or unintentionally. God, who is our loving and protective Father, would never think of leaving us to fend for ourselves in living good, moral, and holy lives. Just like human parents, He guides, teaches, and forms us as His children, giving us everything we need to grow in faith and goodness. Now, freedom is properly guided only by a well-formed conscience. Back when the communist governments of the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe fell in the late 1980s and the early 1990s, the citizens of those countries faced immediate and critical challenges. Liberation from the tyranny and oppression they had known for so long was indeed a great blessing. But freedom is more than release from tyranny. How would they put freedom to work for the common good? With economies in shambles, new systems of free enterprise had to be created. Since there was little effective government infrastructure, democratic processes had to be put in place. Since civil order and public safety had been in the hands of an often terrorist military, provision had to be made for adequate and humane police protection. And since the majority of government budgets had been given over to military spending, it was necessary to reorganize priorities with primary concern for people, not military might. But there was also a subtle and ultimately more important challenge facing the people: how to use their personal freedom in a changed society. Vast new opportunities, choices, and influences were open to them, particularly to the young, for the first time. It was in part for all of these reasons that Blessed John Paul II wrote his encyclical, The Splendor of the Truth, in 1993. We'll come back to that in our next video. Keep in mind that our conscience speaks lovingly within us, a voice that comes from the Word of God, from the love of God for us, to help us always to follow His ways, to live the good, to say the good, to do the good, and to avoid evil, which is beneath our human dignity.